Amira, a frail little girl with bright, curious eyes, spent her evenings wiping tables in a small café tucked in the heart of the bustling city. The café was noisy, filled with chatter, the clinking of cups, and the aroma of fresh coffee, but Amira remained invisible to most customers. Her clothes were simple, her shoes worn thin, yet her spirit carried a quiet strength. One fateful afternoon, a group of executives entered, led by Mr. Reinhardt, a millionaire CEO whose stern reputation echoed across Europe. The staff scurried nervously around him, but Amira kept her head down, sweeping crumbs from a corner table. Suddenly, the café's landline phone rang shrilly, and no one seemed willing to pick it up. Amira hesitated, then, with timid courage, lifted the receiver. On the other end, a voice spoke rapid German. To the shock of everyone present, the little girl replied fluently, her tone polite and assured. The executives paused mid-sentence, their eyes fixed on her. Mr. Reinhardt leaned back in his chair, studying her intently. As she continued the conversation in flawless German, the café fell silent, as though the air itself had stilled to listen. When she hung up, Reinhardt approached and asked her questions, in German. Amira answered, cheeks flushed, explaining how her late grandmother had taught her through old books and crackly radio broadcasts. It was her secret world, hidden behind poverty. The CEO's lips curled into the faintest smile, the kind people rarely saw. He said nothing more, but as he left, he glanced back at her one last time. Amira didn't know it then, but that ordinary phone call had planted the seed of something extraordinary. The following morning, life in Amira's cramped apartment began like any other. Her mother prepared a simple breakfast, apologizing for not having more to offer, while Amira packed her worn-out schoolbooks. But then, the sound of a sleek engine outside startled them both. Neighbors peeked through curtains as a glossy black car stopped in front of their building. Out stepped Mr. Reinhardt himself, dressed impeccably, carrying a briefcase that seemed to belong to another world entirely. Amira froze by the window, disbelief written all over her face. Within moments, he was standing in their humble living room, his towering figure filling the small space. Her mother, embarrassed by the peeling paint and broken furniture, offered him tea in chipped cups. But the CEO didn't seem to notice, his sharp eyes were focused on Amira. He told her mother of the previous evening, praising Amira's intelligence and fluency. Her mother listened with tears threatening to fall, unsure whether this was kindness or a cruel joke. But Reinhardt then revealed his purpose. He wanted to sponsor Amira's education at one of the city's most prestigious international schools, fully funded by his company. He handed over official documents, contracts, and signatures, proving his sincerity. Her mother, overwhelmed, asked why a man of such wealth would do this. He replied simply, because talent like hers deserves a stage, not a tablecloth. Amira sat speechless, her small hands trembling on her lap. The weight of a dream she had never dared to imagine suddenly pressed against her heart. That day, their world shifted forever, not with riches falling from the sky, but with the promise of opportunity. Amira's first day at the International Academy was like stepping into another universe. The gates were tall, the hallways gleamed with polished marble, and children arrived in shiny cars with chauffeurs, dressed in perfectly tailored uniforms. In contrast, Amira wore her second-hand clothes and carried a weathered satchel. She walked nervously, every whisper behind her back echoing like thunder. Some students smirked, mocking her modest appearance, while others dismissed her entirely, as if she didn't belong. Her stomach nodded, and doubt gnawed at her confidence. During her first German class, the professor asked a complicated grammar question, and the room fell silent. The wealthiest, most polished students shifted uncomfortably, unable to answer. Then, almost instinctively, Amira raised her hand. The professor looked surprised but nodded. Rising to her feet, she delivered a perfect explanation in crisp, fluid German. The words flowed effortlessly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. When she finished, the class was stunned into silence. Slowly, applause began, first from the professor, then from several students. The whispers that had mocked her earlier now turned into murmurs of admiration. For the first time that day, Amira held her head high. She realized that wealth could buy luxury, but it couldn't buy knowledge, discipline, or resilience. Though the road ahead would be hard, she had proven to herself, and everyone else, that she was worthy of standing in that grand school. That single moment transformed fear into courage, and the spark of confidence within her began to glow brighter. Weeks passed, and Amira settled into her new life, though challenges remained. Some students still looked down on her, and she often felt like an outsider. Yet, every time doubt crept in, she remembered her grandmother's words, "Your mind is your true treasure, Amira. No one can take that away." Then came the day of a special event at the academy, an international conference attended by diplomats, CEOs, and media. Mr. Reinhardt himself was the guest of honor, set to deliver a keynote speech in German. The academy's translator, however, fell ill at the last moment. Panic spread among the organizers. That's when Reinhardt turned to Amira, who was sitting nervously in the audience. "Will you help me?" he asked softly. Her heart pounded, but she nodded. As Reinhardt spoke in German, Amira stood at his side, translating each line into perfect English with clarity and confidence. The room listened in awe, captivated not only by Reinhardt's powerful words but by the small girl with the steady voice who bridged two worlds effortlessly. Cameras flashed, journalists scribbled, and by the time she finished, the hall erupted in applause. Reinhardt placed a hand on her shoulder, his pride unmistakable. For Amira, it was a test of destiny, and she had passed. News of Amira's story spread like wildfire. The poor girl who spoke the CEO's language became a headline across newspapers and television broadcasts. Interviews followed, and soon Amira was no longer just a student, she was a symbol of hope for children trapped in poverty, proof that brilliance could shine through even the darkest circumstances. At a press conference, Reinhardt announced the creation of a new educational foundation, inspired by Amira, to provide scholarships for other gifted but underprivileged children. Standing beside him, Amira felt a swell of pride, not just for herself, but for the countless others whose lives might now change. When she returned home, her mother embraced her tightly, whispering through tears, "Your grandmother would be so proud." Amira realized then that her journey was only beginning. The café phone call that had once seemed so ordinary had become the turning point of her entire destiny. And as she gazed toward the future, her heart brimmed with determination. She was no longer just a poor little girl answering calls, she was a young woman destined to inspire the world.